Welcome to this press conference from the German Pavilion. The main topic today is the Climate Finance Delivery Plan and any further discussions based on that plan here on the COP26. And so I say a warm welcome to State Secretary Jochen Flasbarth and the Canadian Minister for Energy, Jonathan Wilkinson, who are here. They are the negotiators of this climate finance plan. They are the responsibles for this climate finance plan, and they will inform you about all that what I mentioned. So we are here in a hybrid setting. Journalists can follow us here on the COP26 in Glasgow in the German Pavilion with their headset, and they can ask questions via Slido. And I see there are many journalists in our Zoom room. Just raise your hand during the Q&A, and then I call you for questions. We have 30 minutes. We should be really on time today because there's a tough timetable of both our guests here. That's my first hint so far, and now we start with State Secretary Jochen Flasbarth from the German Ministry for Environment.
Good morning, everybody. Especially good morning to my good friend Jonathan Wilkinson, with whom I started when he was Minister for the Environment with his task, and now he's Minister for it's more than energy, it's natural resources and Canada. Pleasure to have you here with us and to brief the media about the 100 billion delivery plan. Just to remind everybody, this goes back to 2009, when in Copenhagen, quite a disastrous situation for global climate policy. One way out into the future was the commitment of developed countries to provide $100 billion annually as of 2020 for developing countries to support them in their efforts for mitigation and adaptation. And that also went into the Paris package in one of the decisions there. And looking at the latest available numbers from 2019, it became clear we will not reach the 100 billion in due time in 2020, and that was the starting point for the president of this COP, Alok Sharma, to ask Jonathan Wilkinson and me to work on a plan and on a delivery plan, laying out where we are at the moment, where we will be in the near future, and how we will develop climate finance from developed countries as well of development banks, multilateral and national development banks over the next years. I can say we took this task very serious. We worked a lot with developed countries to urge them to come up with additional pledges for the next years. And the very, very positive message, I need to say, is we got a lot of understanding how important it is not only for trust building but also to provide the means for our developing countries partners to take climate action both on mitigation and adaptation. We heard a number of additional pledges. I don't want to name all of them. They are on the website of the presidency. Maybe I should mention that the announcement of President Biden in spring to double U.S. climate finance, and then again a couple of weeks ago to double it again, so it's to quadruple it to $11.4 billion. Also brought us in a better position to convince other partners to do so. And so over the time of the next years until 2025, we could lay out that we will reach in average the 100 billion. So there will be an underperformance at the beginning, 2020 and 21. We will get very close in reach to the 100 billion in 2022. Maybe my final words are We thought already 3 weeks ago that we would have all pledges that are in reach on our table, but we saw even yesterday from Japan a very substantive announcement of another 10 billion over the next years. We heard from Norway that they will do also something additional, and what we can do now is to urge developed countries parties not to stop in their endeavor. So if we are lucky, we can reach the 1 billion already in 2022, but definitely in 2023. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jochen. I will endeavor not to repeat what Jochen had said, but I think just a couple of things. So Paris was certainly, the focus of Paris obviously were on commitments and promises around the things that we all knew that we needed to do in order to make progress on what is an existential crisis for everyone who lives on this planet. And I think Glasgow is very much about trust and it's about delivery going forward. One of the goals, as Jochen said, was, flowing from Paris, was the mobilization of $100 billion for the developed world to transfer to the developing world to help with both mitigation and adaptation to the effects of climate change. As I think we all recognize, the primary cause of climate change are the CO2 emissions associated with the developed economies, the manner in which we have developed our economies over the past number of decades. The importance, I think, of the $100 billion goal can't really be overstated. It's not simply a matter of money, it's also a matter of trust. And when it became apparent with the latest OECD report that we were very likely to miss the 2020 target, I think there was a lot of disappointment on the part of developing countries. I think there was a lot of disappointment on the part of many donor countries. And I think there was a fear that a failure to achieve the $100 billion level could lead to an erosion of trust, which is so essential for success here at Glasgow and beyond. And so the president of COP, Alex Sharma, asked Jochen and I to lead a process to see how we could find pathways to achieve that goal and to determine exactly when we could achieve that goal. I think when we started, and I hope my friend Jochen won't mind me saying this, that at the beginning, I think one of the first things you said to me was that you felt like maybe we signed up for Mission Impossible. And yet, through the course of this process, many donor countries have stepped up and raised their level of ambition, such that we are now in a position through the delivery plan to show that we will come close to hitting the $100 billion target in 2022, we will achieve it in 2023, and we will overachieve it in 2024 and 2025. That is very significant. I think as Jochen noted, in addition to what is covered in the delivery plan, we've seen a couple of additional commitments that have been made subsequent to the finalization of the delivery plan, which actually help us even more in terms of ensuring that we are delivering on the commitments that have been made. This is, I think, important. Obviously, as we think about climate finance going forward, we are going to need to work towards the mobilization of trillions of dollars, not simply $100 billion. And that is, underlines the importance of the mobilization of private sector finance going forward, which will be the subject of lots of conversation at this COP. But the $100 billion is critical for trust. It's critical to catalyze private sector investment going forward. And so I do think that this has been an important process. I do want to thank Alex Sharma for asking the two of us to undertake this process, which ultimately I think was quite successful. And I certainly want to thank my friend and colleague Jochen Flasbarth for all of the work that he and the German delegation did to get us here. And with that, I will turn it back to our moderator.
Yeah, thank you to Jochen Flasbarth and Jonathan Wilkinson for their introduction and explaining words. We come now to your questions, so please raise your hand. I have a long list of participants I see in front of me on the screen, so just please raise your hand, and then we start with the first question, and then we put you on the screen, and you can directly ask. So, who is first? I know that Susanne Götze had a question. She told me beforehand. Is she in the room already? Susanne Götze from Spiegel. Okay, she seems not to be here. Oh yeah, she's outside. Okay, she's outside. Okay, she's writing the question. I see. She gives us a sign. Anybody else here in the room who raises a hand? Just put you on the screen if you have a question. Otherwise, I start with the question from Susanne Götze. She has written it now to me. Which countries have given new pledges in the last days? Are there any news about new pledges from industrial countries? Who wants to start?
So my understanding is Japan has made an additional commitment. And I also understand that Norway has indicated that it will be coming forward with an additional commitment. So there are at least two.
Then there was another question also from Susanne Götze about the words from President Biden yesterday to the Climate Finance Delivery Plan. He said that there is a guarantee that the 100 billion pledge will come. How do you comment on this?
He's right. It's absolutely right, and we worked hard for it, also with the support of President Biden. It will not be available in 2020 and 21, as we said, but it will be available. And maybe I can use this question to say a few words on that. I think, looking at the whole picture, there is no need that, or there is no reason that a developed country can be specifically proud because they haven't met it in 2020. But they have shown that they are sticking to their promise. A bit delayed, but they will overachieve it. So that's the developed country side. And on the other side, I think there is no reason for developing countries to be fundamentally upset about the figures. We understand that they are disappointed, and we have noticed it in many discussions with them. But I think overall, what we could outline with our report, parties can trust each other, and we are not always directly on the same line, but it's not a fundamental thing of misusing the trust that had been in the rooms over the last decades, and that is something I think that can make us very confident to start in this decade where it's much more about mutually working together for our global climate targets, and as Jonathan Wilkinson said, it will be about much more than about billions. It will be about trillions. It's very obvious that this cannot be financed from public sources. We need to get the private sector in on the mitigation side, on the energy side, which is now definitely in your portfolio, but that we also will, that we will need on the other side more money for adaptation. That is what the UN General Secretary urges us, developed countries and everybody else, to have a stronger focus on that part of finance. And I think now starting with the discussion on the post-2025 finance architecture, it's a good starting point of what we have now on the table.
I just one thing to add, which is I agree entirely with Jochen in terms of the numbers were not achieved in 2020 and won't be in 2021. But I think one of the positive things that we saw through the course of this process is that they will be overachieved in 2024 and 2025, and they may be overachieved in 2023, such that over the course of the 5-year period, the average is very close to, or if not at, the 500 billion number, which I think is also an important point that we've discussed with many countries that we've met with over the course of the past few weeks.
Next question is coming from Mr. Geinitz from the German newspaper Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. Please, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm still standing in the line. I hope you can hear me. My question goes to the fact that how much money has actually not been paid in the process, and when do you think this money can be paid ex post? And do you think there will be an outcome at this conference that this money that has not been paid will eventually lie on the table? And secondly, about adaptation or the quota for adaptation, Chancellor Merkel indicated that she'd heard the call of the developing countries that more needs to be done in that field. How confident are you that you will reach an agreement on more money spent on adaptation? Thank you so much.
Okay, Mr. Geinitz, I think it's, what are you asking, how much money is missing? We don't know the figures for 2020, but assuming that it might be around what we had in 2019, and there are some indicators given the pandemic, and on the other hand, budget plans had been made prior to the pandemic, so it's very difficult to read it, but I think it's, you can make an assumption that it will be around the 80 billion in 2020. So 20 billion would be missing. And if we get a bit higher in 2021, which is almost over now, you can assume that it will be maybe in the area of 10 billion that are missing. We don't know the exact figures, but looking at the end of the time until 2025, we have in our plan that is published that at the upper end we will achieve in 2025 170 billion. So we heard additional pledges, as we said, during the last 48 hours. So that will add upon that definitely at the end of this period. So we are very confident that in the time from 2020 to 25, we can achieve the average of 100 billion, and I think that is the key message.
Let me just add a couple of things. I think that one of the values of the process that we just went through is that we have a much more forward-looking set of numbers. So the OECD reports typically are backward-looking, and they're 2 years behind in terms of assessing what was achieved. This process has actually allowed us to gather forward-looking commitments, put them in a standardized way, and having the OECD help us with the methodology, such that we actually have high confidence going forward in terms of what these numbers look like. They're based on commitments that have been made. They're based on questionnaires that countries themselves actually filled in. And so I think that when Jochen talks about the ability to over the period, see an average of approximately $100 billion, that's based on data that gives us high confidence that that will be achieved. So I think that's important. With respect to adaptation, the report takes note of the fact that we are seeing significant increases in terms of the commitments that individual countries are making. In terms of the amount of climate finance that's devoted to adaptation. Certainly from Canada's perspective, when the Prime Minister Trudeau was here, he announced in our most recent climate pledge that we will be enhancing our commitment to adaptation to 40% of our climate finance pledge, which is a significant increase from what it has been. And certainly on a go-forward basis, the report takes note of the fact that the discussion around the balance between adaptation and mitigation is going to be the subject of continuing discussion for the post-2025 period.
So we continue with a question from an anonymous media. I don't know who is giving us this question, so please maybe tell us your media afterwards now. It's about harmful subsidies. Is there any impact on this discussion also on the 100 billion process?
Well, it's not covered by our delivery plan because the commitment was to provide money, 100 billion, to mobilize them from various sources. But of course, as is mentioned in the question, it's in German, so it says it makes only sense to spend money on mitigation and adaptation if you reduce further subsidies. And I cannot agree more. That's absolutely true. And I've been this morning in a meeting with John Kerry, where he rightly pointed out this is really something that is in a way perverse, that we are subsidizing something that causes a problem for the planet. So we should get rid of that. And I know that also in my country, and maybe that's the background for the question, we are discussing how to reduce subsidies that are controversial to our overall environmental and climate targets.
Yeah, and I think it's useful to note that the G20 has committed to phasing out of fossil fuel subsidies by 2025. Some countries, including Canada, have agreed that we will do that more quickly. I think our target is by no later than 2023. So.
Okay, are there any other questions in the room? So far, I can't see any hand raised. Herr Geines, once again, the last question.
Yeah, if you allow me to, you talked about mobilizing private capital. How happy are you with the announcement of the multinational and international national development banks, and what do you expect the private sector to contribute to the finance needed? Thank you.
Maybe I can start. So certainly the multilateral development banks have been part of this process, and certainly I think have looked to raise their level of ambition with respect to the amount of finance that's dedicated for climate. But certainly on a go-forward basis, the mobilization of private sector capital is going to be critical, particularly for mitigation efforts, where there is more often a business case that the private sector will invest in. We were very conservative, I would say, in the delivery plan in terms of the expectations around private sector mobilization. But I would say that going forward, we all certainly hope and expect that we are going to see far greater flows of private sector money into international climate-related investments. And certainly there's a lot of discussion and a lot of work that's gone into preparing for this COP by a number of different organizations, including some that have been led by Mark Carney, focusing, specifically on that issue.
Volker Angres, I saw you with a hand raised. Do you want to start with your question?
Yes, please. My camera doesn't work, unfortunately. Good morning. Well, besides the question, what money will come in what time frame, could you talk a little bit about the question on the mechanism and how the money will be spent by the developing countries into real climate protection projects?
I can kick off, and very sorry for a TV journalist being without camera, by the way. Yes, there are different mechanisms. A lot is channeled through bilateral cooperation. Many countries are doing that. As I can speak for my country, we are doing it through our economic development aid, the Ministry for Economic Cooperation, but we are also doing it through the Ministry of Environment with our international climate initiative. There it's all about very concrete projects, programs in developing countries. So we support, for example, the implementation programs to reach the NDCs in various countries with a huge program. There are some very specific projects like to support the energy transformation, but also we supported public transport plans and programs in partnering countries. And that is the way how many developed countries work. We are also channeling it through international funds, the biggest one's the Green Climate Fund. So it's a broad variety of mechanisms. But on one thing, I want to be very clear. I don't know a single developed countries that puts the money without any very concrete and specific target to the pockets of other governments. That is what I sometimes hear, and that is definitely something that is not happening.
So far, I see no further question in the Zoom room, also not on Slido, so I finish this press conference here. Thank you very much for your interest. The next press conference from the German delegation is today on 11:30 about smaller and larger companies on their way to climate neutrality. Thank you.